In a world gone mad, only one man, okay, maybe more, had the courage to ramble on incoherently. The show is up and the reviews are in. This is the show that many people have described as good. Uninterrupted, Wednesday nights on Tag TV. We're good? Okay.
Welcome, everyone. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but the internet here doesn't like me. Anyways, tonight we have the Justin Trudeau extravaganza show where I would say this is his worst week ever. I would say this is a historically bad week. This is a historically bad week by pre-Justin Trudeau standards. The amount of screw-ups and embarrassments and just general ineptitude, corruption is really staggering, really impressive at this point. It's really impressive what he's allowed to get away with in most of the mainstream media. And we'll also cover why he's getting away with it, because it turns out when you give people $600 million, they tend to say what you want them to say. Who would have thought? Anyway, we'll get into that. So, our top story tonight will be Trudeau's impending censorship of the internet. That will be the top story. We'll go into that. He has released a digital charter. And I'm going to give you my thoughts on it. You can guess some of them probably by how much you watched the show before, but we'll go into that. Then story number 2, which will lead into that, will be liberal corruption. There's 2 major things that are on my mind now. One, the Admiral Mark Norman scandal, basically retroactively giving the patsy who suspended him a raise. It's so blatantly and openly corrupt that it blows my mind, this. And then the second one will be the aforementioned $600 million bribe, and you will love to see who is on the panel deciding who is impartially and trusted media. You would be surprised if you hadn't seen anything from this government in the last 3.5 years. If you have, well, then you'll just be angry with me. Then I want to talk a bit about Justin Trudeau's international image and the complete failures of him to live up to the standard of what a Canadian leader should be, and give my thoughts a bit in this context of globalism, globalization, and how Trudeau fails us. Then we'll get into the Toronto terrorist plot that wasn't. I want to talk about this because going over sort of the information we're being given from politicians and police sources is reminiscent of the Danforth shooting, which totally wasn't a terrorist attack. No, definitely not. And then we will end the show with my thoughts on abortion, which should make everyone happy or unhappy or mad at me or loving me or who knows. It's more my thoughts on the people with thoughts with abortion. Very meta. Before we start, I'm just going to make the announcement that good news, bad news, if you saw it here on the channel before, Tag TV has been receiving some unfriendly messages from the YouTube. So if you've been a YouTube viewer of the show, you might notice this is now on a different YouTube channel. I have had a backup YouTube channel under my name in case the trust and safety team got wise to it. So because Tag TV does a lot of great work and does a lot of work in other communities, it's not great for me to be associated with them, but, so good news. The shows will be on YouTube. You can see them on the page. I'll post them. They'll be coming up Thursdays now. If you want to watch them live, you got to watch them here on Facebook. But YouTube's will be Thursdays. Good news, however, is now we can name names again. So look out, Islamic Relief Canada, funder of Hamas. We can now say what that is, because now I'm not connected to anyone else. I'm just bringing my own ship down. So names will be named once again. Hallelujah. So welcome everyone to the show, and I am glad you are here with us. So, the Digital Charter of Digital Rights. Could there be such thing as a digital charter that I would approve of? And you can make the argument that yes, we would need a digital charter in the new age. Canada was incepted in 1867, right? America 1776, really more the 1780s. But you can make the argument that our founding fathers had no idea what the internet was, what it was going to be. I mean, how could you really fathom an internet hundreds of years ago? We need a charter of sort of internet values. And you can make the argument, and what they're kind of trying to sort of do in half of it, which I can maybe get behind, is instituting some rights that Canadian citizens would have on the internet. So what a good charter would do is it would outline, you have privacy, right? To protect Canadian privacy. Like, right, we can have an internet charter saying, right, can you sell people's personal information over the internet without them knowing, right? You could have a charter that says if companies or internet companies want to operate in Canada and they want to sell your data, they have to be open about that, right? You have to get a click to view this website, to shop here, we sell your data for whatever. And you can say, like, this brings down the cost by whatever X%. And you can say, hey, screw it, I don't care. Like, everyone has my data anyway, moving on, you know, whatever. You can then set out some rights of what is and what isn't internet privacy, because that is a big issue. Like, I am not one of those, you know, I think people are quite foolish when they're like, you know, the government is spying on our Facebook. Like, no, Facebook is a public platform. Like, social media, right, everything you put out there is public. So I'm big on that. But there are certain things, like, do the police have the rights to your internet search history without a warrant? There's a very good list. There's a good case to be made of a solid list of internet freedoms that we could talk about in a society in an adult manner, and I could get behind a digital charter of Canadian rights if it focused on literally that. However, for some reason, Justin Trudeau exists. For some reason, this is not about privacy. This is not about Canadians. This is about Christchurch. This is, they even say it in the rhetoric, this is based off of Christchurch and preventing Christchurch from happening again. So their intention with this isn't even secure your data. And we have to go over to the digital platform and what the Liberals are actually saying about this, because I think that is the most important thing. So first, we have to talk about the number one Liberal, the Justin of all Trudeaus, Justin Trudeau. Here is the tweet he sent out about this. So I think it's important because this is the Justin Trudeau account tweet. You know, this is what he says about the Digital Charter of Rights. His number one statement: social media platforms must be held accountable for what hate speech and disinformation we see online. And if they don't step up, there will be consequences. We launched Canada's new Digital Charter today to help guide our decisions. Learn more about it here at link. Then there's a video below of him speaking. So we're going to play that video for you in just a second. But first, I'm just going to point out, that is what he talked about. In not one sentence in this tweet does it talk about privacy or your data. Now, the charter does talk about that stuff, but I'm going to get into what it actually says. At not one point does it mention this. Then he puts this 22-second video that he posted up, that we're going to show you the video in just a sec. This is important. This is what he says. That this is what he says about it. So show the video, and this is what Trudeau thinks of this charter. What's its purpose? Here you go.
The platforms are failing their users, and they're failing our citizens. They have to step up in a major way to counter disinformation. And if they don't, we will hold them to account, and there will be meaningful financial consequences. Those are the thoughts, right? We got to punish the social media platforms because they're failing Canadians and spreading hate. So again, the whole thing he posted, this is to him, in Justin Trudeau's words, all about online hate speech and fake news, right? We got a disinformation and hate speech and all that. That is the purpose of this. And I kind of liked how he got his Canada's racist voice on. Like, we can all agree Justin Trudeau is a pretty terrible public speaker. For someone who is a substitute drama teacher, you would expect a better public speaking performance from a former substitute drama teacher. I mean, his only qualifications are substitute drama teacher, also snowboarded once, plus my daddy. Right? You think his number one life experience would translate to better speeches, but you find Justin Trudeau is only able to sort of carry any sort of charisma when he's talking about how bad Canada is, right? We're colonial with this, and we gotta apologize to everyone, but never apologize for my actions. I always apologize for Stephen Harper, not for me, right? Canada is racist, right? You saw the fire in his voice there. That was the good, charismatic Justin Trudeau. We're going to stop hate speech. We're going to censor the internet. We're going to take away your rights. Canada's evil. Social media is bad. Anyone who says mean things about me is a Nazi, right? That's when he gets passionate, is when he's talking about how much he hates Canada or how much he wants to ruin Canada. So you can tell that this is important to Justin Trudeau by the fact that there were almost no ahs, or he didn't stumble over his own words and then forget a country existed. What is in the Digital Charter? So the Digital Charter lays out 10 points, and it describes them, how they see it. Now, the Charter itself is pretty toothless here, but I'm going to talk about why that's also important later. So the number one thing in the Charter, we're going to go in direct order as I set it out. Universal access is their number one charter.
And it's described, all Canadians will have equal opportunity to participate in the digital world and the necessary tools to do so, including access, connectivity, literacy, and skills. Like, okay, what does that really mean? We're not sure. It kind of sounds like he's promising free internet here, which we know he's not. This is, to me, left-wing mumbo-jumbo. Internet-themed left-wing mumbo-jumbo. Everyone should have access and connectivity. Everyone should have the skills. Like, what, are we going to make everyone internet savvy? Like, are we going to teach everyone how to post something on Twitter? Like, click the post button, you idiot. I think I just saved the government $10 million. Safety and security, because you're very unsafe and secure. Canadians will be able to rely on the integrity, authenticity, and security of the services they use and should feel safe online. Okay, again, the first half of this is words. Really? Canadians rely on integrity, authenticity, and security of services they should feel, like, of what? Of, like, does every internet site have to be safe and secure? Secure under what parameters? Like, from emotional harm? From piracy? Right? If you're saying, right, this is the problem. Like, define what you mean. Right? Every Canadian should feel safe from, you know, data thieves or something. Right? That would be a reasonable thing to feel safe from. Safe from internet piracy. Instead, this is safe, and they should feel safe online. And again, I hate this. Never, ever, ever, ever should the government talk about the emotional state of the citizenry in a law. That is horrible, horrible idea. Because everyone must feel a certain way in the law. The leeway for the abuse of that term is substantial. Okay, number 3, control and consent. Canadians will have control over what data they are sharing, who's using their personal data and for what purposes, and to know their privacy is protected. That's not bad, right? If that was consent and control, number 3 I actually think is a good thing. If you said, you know, that was the outline for this Charter of Rights, that sentence there, I'd be like, okay, yeah, you know, personal data. Your personal data is personal. There's, you know, privacy does extend in somewhat to the online world in a way. Let's have this conversation. Again, that'd be good. Don't worry, that gets undermined as we get down this chart. Don't worry, that's going away. That good feeling you have right now, oh, bottle it up, sniff it in, and then get ready to put it up. Transparency, portability, interoperability. I don't know what the last word means. I'll be honest, I don't know what that means. Canadians will have a clear and manageable access to their personal data and should feel free to share or transfer it with undue burden. What? What does that mean? Like, I think that just means the internet exists. I think they just wanted 10 points, so they just added some stuff. That's, I guarantee you, they had 4, maybe 4.5 points here, and then they're just like, let's get to 10, that's a nice round number. Now, transparency. As you collect yourself laughing, I have the Liberals lecturing us on transparency. I'll give you a minute, give you a second, take a breath, move on to number 5. Open and modern digital government. What does that mean? Canadians will be able to access modern digital services from the Government of Canada, which are secure and simple to use. Good, right? 3 and 5, good. But I don't know why that should be in a law. That should be more of a, it's more of like a promise. But again, this is just guidelines. Again, 3 and 5, okay, yeah, 3 and 5. 1, 2, and 4 mean absolutely nothing. 3 and 5 are okay. Don't worry. Once you get to 7, you're gonna get angry. 6, a level playing field. The Government of Canada will ensure the fair competition in the online marketplace to facilitate growth of Canadian businesses and affirm Canada's leadership on digital and data innovation while protecting Canadian consumers from market abuses. Again, so incredibly vague. That could be good, that could be bad. Some of the bad thing is like protecting consumer from market abuses. Like, what do you mean? Like, are we going to regulate the market? Right? So we're going to ensure fair competition, right, by freeing up the markets, and then we're going to control the markets. So the first part of 6 disagrees with the second part of 6. Welcome to Liberal government. Okay, now we get into the bad. Data and digital for good is point number 7. Okay, this, I hate using this, but it is very dangerous, and it's not even a question of danger. It always goes bad. every time the government tries to put things like good or evil into law, right? We want to stop things that are good or bad. Like, we want good things, we don't want bad things, because who defines any of these terms? The Government of Canada will ensure the ethical use of data to create value, promote openness, and improve lives of people home and around the world. Again, why are we talking about around the world? Because he just has to. But now we're talking about the ethical use of data. Like, the government will now ensure your use of data. Remember when StatsCan had a massive leak of all the data? So we know the Canadian government isn't a secure place for our data because it's been leaked multiple times. Canadian data has gotten out from StatsCan. But I thought the whole thing, the whole good parts of this charter were talking about stopping the use, the unauthorized use of data, right? Isn't that the good use? But no, the Canadian government's going to decide how your data is being used. What could go wrong? What could go wrong with the government being in charge of all your personal information? Don't worry, only for good. They're only going to do good things. All right. 8, strong democracy. Okay, coming out of nowhere here, but let's go for it. The Government of Canada will defend freedom of expression. Collect yourselves. The Government of Canada will defend freedom of expression and protect against online threats and disinformation designed to undermine the integrity of elections and democratic institutions. Okay, I love the Liberals here because they're so good at just, it's in the same sentence. For the first part of the sentence does not agree with the second part of the sentence. The Government of Canada will ensure freedom of expression. I start laughing, and then I continue reading, and protect against online threats and disinformation, right? Part of your rights is to say things that are wrong. That is freedom of expression, right? When you just have it in law, you can't say false things on social media, right? Who makes the, you just, right? If we can't say anything that's untrue, right? If I say a rabbi, a priest, and an imam walk into a bar, right? This didn't happen. This is clearly a lie. Clearly this is fake news. It could also be a joke. Who knows, right? But this is so poorly defined, which means it's going to be left up to arbitrary censors, which is never a good thing. And now we get into the crux of the issue. Number 9, free from hate and violent extremism. I don't know the internet was violent, but okay. Canadians can expect that digital platforms will not foster or disseminate violent extremism, or criminal content. The Muslim Brotherhood, Justin. All these anti-Israel groups who consistently put out violent propaganda against Jews. Is that considered violent extremism? Is that considered hate? Right? You can't disseminating hate. Like, again, I hate this because 1, who defines hate? And 2, hate is an emotion. You're allowed to feel it. It should be legal to hate people. It should be legal to hate ideas. Now, it should be socially unpopular to hate people, even more unpopular to hate generalized groups of people. But what am I doing now? I'm promoting hatred of this digital charter, right? Hate against who, for what, under what content. Criminal content is already illegal, so I don't know what we're talking about here. This is so over vague and overbroad. It reeks of something written in crayon by Justin Trudeau, although I don't think he can count to 10, so I don't think he wrote this. And then here's your you play the communist anthem in your head. Strong enforcement and real accountability. Ooh, we're going to get some strong enforcement on the internet. What could go wrong? There will be clear, meaningful penalties for violations of the laws and regulations that support these principles. There you go. Right there. There's going to be laws, it's going to regulate what you're going to do, and we're going to punish people. Right? This is not about protecting your privacy. This is not about the good parts of a digital charter that I had outlined. Right? Theoretically, I could get behind data privacy protection laws. You know, Walmart can't sell your data to Google or vice versa. Like, your data, you have to be open and transparent with what you're doing, and people have to consent and agree. Good. Again, what was it, 3 and 5? I can get behind. You know, government should be more digitized and easy to access. Yes, it should in the new digital world. That's a great thing, right? We don't need to go into libraries in Ottawa. The world, you know, you should be able to see what the government's doing on your cell phone. Great idea. Consent and control, great idea. Everything else, though, specifically undermines all those good things. Right? We're going to protect your data, but don't worry, we're going to take it and we're going to use it for good. Never mind the fact that your data has been leaked out of StatsCan before.
right? And then we're going to protect freedom of expression by monitoring what you're allowed to say. And there's going to be meaningful penalties. And as we saw from Justin Trudeau, right, social media platforms, there will be punishment for the online disinformation out there. Now, social media can't regulate what it is and isn't. And its attempt to do this have just led to further polarization, right? I once got a Facebook strike and a violation. I once committed hate speech because someone said Israel's committing genocide in Gaza, and I said, it's not a genocide. One, the population is increasing, and two, if we're talking about violent deaths, the Gazans primarily get their health care in Israel, which means that on aggregate, Israel saves more lives of Gazans than it kills in these skirmishes. So it can't be a genocide. Flag for hate speech, I lose my appeal for hate speech. Right? Who's that promoting hate against? No one. I'm just saying a fact. Right? But who controls this? Right? Where there's more freedom. So let's get back to the issue on hand, which is the concept of a digital charter and this nebulous promising. This next sentence, this next point has a caveat. I am not a lawyer. I don't know anything about, I'm not a legal scholar. My closest legal qualifications is my brother is in law school and disagrees with me on everything political. But I constantly refer to a Supreme Court decision on assisted suicide. And because it sort of presents my argument of the Canadian Supreme Court and the Canadian court system, which is very, doesn't really run on principle, kind of runs on feelings and rainbows and all that. So here's the Supreme Court decision, Canadian Supreme Court decision on the right to assisted suicide. Now, assisted suicide, complicated issue. We can go into it all day. This isn't the topic. What I am talking about is the reason the Supreme Court gave for allowing assisted suicide is they ruled that in Canada you have the right to life. And not being able to kill yourself violates your right to life. What in fuck what does that mean? That's the worst legal precedent or thought I've ever heard. Okay, again, this isn't an anti-assisted suicide rant. This is just you could think of a much better justification for allowing assisted suicide other than not killing yourself is a violation of your right to life. Also, yeah, abortion, no restrictions. Okay, so this is my point here. This is a vague and nebulous charter, which means it has the will to be interpreted by whoever wants it. So when you put in nebulous things like we have a right to freedom and fairness and against hate and social media will be punished, right? Then you create a scenario where we even have social justice tribunals that don't run on precedent. They can outlaw precedent. So now you have some sort of nebulous laws and outlines that an activist judge or jury could then take in, interpret the way they want to, and then come to a decision, just like how the Supreme Court did for assisted suicide. So that's the problem. So the argument, I guarantee, I will bet you, I'm going to bet everyone $1 billion, and if you've watched the show long enough, or you know anything about Canadian politics, you should be smart enough not to take this bet with me. But I will bet you $1 million, $1 billion, $10 trillion, all the money I have, that the argument that the left and the media will use to counter people getting upset about the digital charter will be the same argument they used for the Global Compact on migration, which was it's a non-binding agreement argument, right? The non-binding argument, right? This is a really, really toothless law. It doesn't say anything. It doesn't set any specifics. It doesn't, talk about how things will fit into the existing criminal code. It gives no specifics. It gives no legal justification. It's just this sort of nebulous thing that's not really binding, right? Again, Motion 103, these are non-binding. Conservatives just getting upset about things that are non-binding. Ha, stupid conservatives. Right? Whereas we say it's more the principle of the issue. It is outlining very, very bad principles in a nebulous way that are open to interpretation of activist judges. That is the argument. And they will ignore that argument. They will just say, ha 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 ha, stupid conservatives, it's not even a real law yet, and they're still getting upset. And they will ignore the fact that our real criticism is the content, is the principles behind the entire law. Right? I think hating Muslims is bad. However, M103, the Islamophobia motion, was terrible legislation that should never be passed.
sets out tons and tons of bad principles. Some of them we see coming up again in this one, which was the government's right to enforce the emotional feelings or create laws based on the emotional state of the populace, which is bad, right? And also loosely defined Islamophobia, which was a catastrophe in itself. So that's the Digital Charter of Rights, or the anti-rights, whatever you want to call it. Okay. I'm going to move on to the second biggest story. I kind of switched up how I said it before, but we should talk about the media bribe, the $600 million media bribe, because Canada is turning into a banana republic in front of my eyes, and it hurts me because I love this country, and you know, for the longest time, yes, the Liberals have always been corrupt. Like, yes, we had the sponsorship scandal. Yes, it's Kathleen Wynne and Dalton McGuinty's Ontario. Yes, Christy Clark's BC. Like, yeah, there's always been Liberal corruption. There's always corruption in the most popular party because you could just get away with it. But there used to be some sort of gentlemanly agreement in the West when you have to sort of, you know, cover it up. Is sort of the social contract we have, right? When my brothers and I were teenagers, my father would say to us things like, you know, you do what you want, just make sure I don't catch you, right? If you're going to drink and this and that, just make sure you do it under the table. Don't make it obvious, like don't mess up the house with like, you know, bongs and whatever, don't, but you know, under the table. There's a social contract here. Corruption, you should cover it up. Don't put it in front of the eyes. But that's totally out the window with this Liberal government. Fuck you all. Canada's going to basically African dictatorship status. So we talked about this a lot because it's the most important story in Canada right now, and no one in the media will cover it because it is about the media and their integrity as the institution that protects democracy, supposedly. So $595 million will be allocated to trustworthy news sources online and in print. And I talked about the many things wrong with this. One, it doesn't actually solve the problems of the non-competitiveness of the major institutions caused by over-regulatory burden. It keeps the regulations on them and influxes them with government cash, creating this cycle of failure that will keep the media dependent on the government, thus degrading their integrity as a neutral body. But we're being told that there's going to be an independent committee formed to decide who and who isn't trustworthy. Guess who's going to be on the committee? A journalistic union called Unifor. Bring up the picture. Here we are. Here's a Facebook post from them. This is Twitter. Yes. Unifor's National Elective Board starts planning for the federal election today at Andrew Scheer. Okay, this is from last year. They call themselves The Resistance. Welcome to Andrew Scheer's worst nightmare. This is literally a picture of them putting themselves up, calling themselves The Resistance to Andrew Scheer, who is not in office right now. Andrew Scheer is the leader of the opposition. He has no power in the government, yet the largest media union has declared themselves preemptively the resistance to Andrew Scheer. These are the people Justin Trudeau has pointed out to regulate who will get money to promote the truth. How stupid do you think we are? And that's not even the question. It's not a question of how stupid you think you are. It's the Liberals now know what they can get away with in this country. It is a complete failure of the Fourth Estate. The Fourth Estate is dead, and it's not just the CBC. It is wholly corrupt. Because, yeah, there'll be a story about this in The Sun, maybe. But again, they don't want to rock the boat because they're going to need that $600 million. So they're not going to want to go. These people decide who gets $600 million and who doesn't. Which means the people who are supposed to go after them, right, they don't have to, they're incentivized not to, which is in itself its own problem. But the fact that they can do this openly, right, the media is supposed to function in a way that when there is open corruption, the media makes a storm because it preserves the integrity of the government. And that's actually a good thing for the country internationally and abroad, because one of the things that we function on as a democracy, as a Western country, as a first world country for now, is the fact that we have moral authority, is that when we see obvious corruption, right, when our dictators' friends get bribes in public, there's a media which says this is bullshit, then the Canadian public goes against their leader, we're not violently oppressed, and then they are voted out, and this is sort of our value. And the Fourth Estate, the media is supposed to function as this check and balance within our democracy that actually makes our country stronger. The fact that the media can stand up to the government makes the country stronger. This is a complete corrosion of that principle. Now, we see this again. Okay, so maybe it's just on this story. You can say maybe it's just on the media corruption story, but it is not. Admiral Mark Norman. You might know the story, might not. So it was settled. Last week I talked about the fact that the government has thrown out the charges against Admiral Mark Norman. They were stupid to begin with, and so the government dropped the charges, right? Because it was quite obviously an S&C Part 2, right? It was about liberal corruption where they wanted to sort of at the expense of the function of our Navy, they were going to spend a couple more years and waste billions of taxpayer dollars so a company with connections to the Liberal Party could get the contract instead of the company that the Harper government had given it to in the first place. This would have left our military, our Navy and military in a worse condition. It would have left the Canadian taxpayers footing the bill for a breach of contract, and then it would have made Trudeau's friends a little bit richer. Admiral Mark Norman, supposedly or allegedly, now no longer allegedly, the thing was, Mark Norman had leaked files about cabinet meetings to the media, saving the Navy and saving the Canadian taxpayer. How dare he? The person who suspended Admiral Mark Norman, General Jonathan Vance, the highest ranking general, he says, it was my decision and it was my responsibility. He even is quoted last week as saying he had absolutely zero contact with the government on any of this. If you believe that, I have a bridge to sell you. But then the story comes out a couple days ago that Justin Trudeau has given General Vance a raise that is retroactive. So he even raised his salary from last year. This is not the stuff you're supposed to do, even if General Vance was clearly acting at the behest of Trudeau, which I think it is safe to assume. I am making the assumption that there was collusion between Vance and Trudeau to pick a patsy that was high up enough, and Vance went with him, and because Vance did his job, he got a raise to the upper limit of general. He's being paid the absolute maximum per the recommendation of the Prime Minister. So let's recap here. Vance had absolutely nothing to do with the government collusion, right? Vance had nothing to do with the Liberal government. He did this completely on its own. Okay? And Justin Trudeau has decided to reward him retroactive for the great job he did in the previous year as well. So Trudeau said, oh, he's done such a great job. However, if we were to take both of these as true, right? Let's just take Trudeau thought he did a really good job, that's why he's getting a raise, and he had absolutely nothing to do with the political decisions because integrity and whatnot. You'd have to say, though, the reason he got this raise is he was the one who it was his decision to suspend Admiral Mark Norman. That resulted in the government having to throw out the case against Admiral Mark Norman because they could not make the case against him. They didn't expect the Canadian public to get behind him and finance his legal defense fund with a pretty kick-ass lawyer. They did not expect that. So you're telling me, if we're going to believe this all, that Justin Trudeau said, what a great job you did, General Vance, with that Admiral Mark Norman case. Here's a raise. But they threw out the case. The government essentially came out and said, we don't have a case, which means that General Vance actually did a bad job. So believe what you want here. Believe that General Vance had no political pressure on him. Believe that Justin Trudeau just thought he did a great job, even though his government said he did a bad job. Right? Like the amount of conflicting messages you have to process here is outstanding. But again, like this is banana republic stuff, right? A dictator giving money publicly to people who do his dirty work. Right? The problem here is with the transparent corruption. And this hurts us when we have to do things like try and negotiate for our people back with China, explain to China why we arrested Meng Wanzhou, because we're a country of laws. Allegedly. Not anymore. So this is a problem because the media isn't functioning. Like, yes, there are stories about this in all the major papers, but it's like one, maybe two stories that goes away. And then we talk more about Alabama's abortion laws than we do about the collapse of democratic institutions in our country. And the only way we can save democratic institutions is by monitoring what people say on Facebook and Twitter. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. Okay. One thing I want to talk about here is the importance of Canada as a global power, we'll say. Everyone who watches the show should know that I am hardline anti-globalist. I don't like the concept of globalism.
However, I draw a distinction between globalism and globalization, right? We should have global markets. It is good that we have trade relationships with the United States. It's good that we have trade relationships with Europe, right? The world should be more open and connected in terms of information flow and resource flow. Like, you like pizza, or you like food, you like buying food, you like the fact that a slice of pizza doesn't cost $25, right? That's only brought to you by different markets, global markets working together to reduce the price of goods under the auspices of free trade and open markets vis-a-vis cross-border capitalism. That's good. Globalism, is the concept of the breakdown of nationalism, right? The control of the forfeit of national sovereignty to a governing body vis-a-vis the United Nations, right? The fact that we should intervene in the politics as a global group of individual countries, like the destruction of national sovereignty. I'm a hard line against that. Now, I am seeing some disturbing trends, and we see on the left and right, especially a lot in the anti-globalist movement, you could say maybe the yellow vests and such, of growing isolationism coming up in Canada. And that's a real bad thing, because Canada should not be isolationist. Our power actually comes from our ability to be part of the world. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of Canada's background, then I'm going to relate this to everything we've been talking about with China and the liberal corruption. Canada is a middle power, and the reason why we're in the G8, why we're considered one of the 8 most influential countries in the world when we're not in terms of an economy, is because of the great work we do internationally. So Canada was famous, right when the UN used to be effective, we managed to solve the Suez Canal crisis and avoided a potential global war. Like, the Cold War could have started becoming a hot war if Lester B. Pearson and Diefenbaker didn't work together to diffuse the situation between Israel, Egypt, Britain, and France. That's a good thing. Canada's power comes from the fact that we are tenacious defenders of Western civilization, and we are trusted by all parties. So when Stephen Harper gets in front of the United Nations, gets in front of the world and says to Vladimir Putin, I'll shake your hand, but you have to get out of the Ukraine, that's good. That means the Americans want us around, because we get good deals, and we get benefits. We get included in all these trade deals, we get included in all these security talks, we get the benefits of batting above our weight class, because we are a country that has exported Western values in a reasonable and pleasant manner, and we have the trust of all different types of societies, right? We fought for Europe against the Nazis, we liberated the Netherlands, right? We negotiated between the Israelis, the Egyptians, and the Europeans, right? All sides had to trust us there. Our power comes from the fact that we can be seen as a reasonable person that exports Western values, which means we are way more valuable to the Germans, the British, the French, and the Americans, who have enemies as bigger powers. They use Canada to sort of help get their messages out there, and we benefit from that, and they benefit from that. That is our strength. Our strength as Canadians comes in a globally connected world. Now, that being said, we shouldn't get in the politics of other countries, but being a negotiator, being a voice for peace, these are good things. Bring us to a statement said by the former ambassador to China. The former ambassador to China got on and said that if Justin Trudeau called the Chinese government, they wouldn't even pick up the phone right now. This is the state of Little Potato, his actual nickname in China. So let's bring this all for a circle. This is a catastrophe for Canada. The fact that we have no allies in the world right now is baffling. The fact that the United States and China are in the middle of a trade war, and neither the United States nor China wants to talk to Canada. Obviously you should take America's side, but okay, let's say we hate Trump because he's racist and he promotes whatever, and he doesn't want to abort babies and all the things that make him super evil. Okay. Fine. We should at least have a good relationship with China then, right? We should at least be getting products. But no, somehow, I don't know how, we have a bad relationship with both China and America simultaneously. How did both of those relationships take a hit when both those countries went together? Like, all you had to do was maybe back one side or the other and we'd be in a much better place. But no, both of them hate us. So here is why we need a healthy functioning media to stop corruption. Because when the Chinese get mad at us, when we arrest people like Meng Wanzhou for sanctions busting in Iran, which is the law, we have to be able to go to Chinese and say, hey, listen, this is an Interpol decision. It's not a top-down decision. I, Justin Trudeau, don't get to decide who we do and do not arrest. This is an international warrant. It really isn't about our federal politics. And the Chinese have to believe us and say, okay, we get it. Let's negotiate here, and we can go from there.
But instead, right on the heels of this, we had the SNC-Lavalin scandal, we have all these retroactive scandals, where it is obviously clear that the Prime Minister's office is interfering in every aspect of Canadian government and life. So then we can't go to the Chinese right now, because the Chinese are a lot of things, they're not stupid. The Chinese government knows what's going on here. The Chinese government knows that Justin Trudeau loves interfering in everyday manners that suit his purposes. And the Chinese are pissed because Justin Trudeau's office is not releasing one of their foreign nationals, one of their important higher up, high society people, right? We arrested Meng Wanzhou. The Chinese know that Trudeau's government can make a phone call and say, hey, release him and we'll give you some subsidies, give you some cushy kickbacks and whatever. Right? And they say, oh no, we don't do that. Except they're openly doing that. Right? They're openly bribing people. They're openly giving kickbacks to their friends. So you can't do this openly, because then the Chinese will say, well, why don't you just do that for us? And when you don't, they boycott you. Also, did I mention his nickname in China is actually Little Potato? It's better than I thought it would be. So this is, it's an utter failure of Justin Trudeau, and it undermines everything Canada stands for, and it's so dangerous and corrosive to the social fabric that this is why Trudeau needs to lose the next election, because we really, really, really must send a message that what Justin Trudeau stands for can't go on. This type of liberal politics, listen, the Liberals will get in power again, but they need to know that Justin Trudeau and that type of holier-than-thou, condescending corruption, open corruption, will be a one-and-done Prime Minister. They have to know that they have to at least, right when you bribe people, under the table. Don't rent a billboard. Under the table. Keep the corruption, try and cover it up, right? And I don't mean like cover it up. Try and keep it as quiet as possible, please. It should be our job to unearth corruption as the media, not to have it thrown in our face blatantly and then ignore it. Literally, if Trudeau is here till 2023, we will not be a top 20 economy for very much longer. Not a chance we're in the G8 if Trudeau gets reelected. All right, so another favorite thing of Justin Trudeau is terrorism. Now, Justin Trudeau, we know, loves terrorists. We learned Elizabeth May, also big fans of Omar Carter, big fans of terrorists. The Toronto terrorist attack that wasn't. There was a that was the picture I was supposed to send. I forgot it. There was a terrorist attack in Canada. There was a terrorist attack foiled this week in Richmond Hill, Toronto. So what you need to know is there was a father and son, and they were making bombs like, kids, fathers and sons, you go, you play catch, you have a moment, you have the talk, then you build a bomb and commit jihad, right? Classic Americana. Classic, right? Play catch, build bombs. So Mahar Mohammedissel and Reza Mohammedissel, these names are probably Iranian by my dialect, Reza definitely. So one 18-year-old, one 47-year-old, they have been caught in their house with explosive materials. They were caught with wires and switches and detonators. Also, the Anarchist Handbook, How to Make Bombs, and extremist propaganda on why you should use bombs. Okay. Ralph Goodall got out and said, Ralph Goodall is the Minister of keeping the public unsafe, Minister of Public Unsafety. So he got out and said, this is no national security concern, nothing to see here. There's no national security concern. Rewind a second. How did we find out about this father and son? Who told us this? Was it a neighbor? Was it the local police force? Or was it the American authorities? Yes, it was the FBI and Border Control who sent notice to the Canadian police that there is probably a terrorist plot going on at this address. Now, how did they know? We don't know. My guess is they ordered bomb-making materials off of Amazon or something through the United States to their Canadian address. They sent out a flag to the American authorities. They then alerted the Canadian authorities, and that's probably how they were caught. Might be different. That's my guess. We don't know. Seems like a reasonable guess. I'm a genius. Give me $1 billion. My new catchphrase. So that's what we know happened. Now this serves no national security threat. Really, a father-son bomb-making team that got the attention of another country's security apparatus isn't a threat to national security. Now, I don't know what type of bombs Ralph Goodall is familiar with, but usually a bomb, in my experience, what I usually see as identify as a bombing is when you make something that explodes with lots of force that kills people. Now, I've been informed by doctors that dying is actually the #1 cause of death. And death is bad for your health. So, by my logic, making explosives that can kill lots of people is actually a threat because, again, 4 to 5 dentists do say that being maimed in a bombing is bad for your personal security. So, with all that information clearly referenced here, it seems unreasonable to assert that a father-son bomb-making team was not a national security threat. Okay. Now, caught with wires, switches, explosive materials, and detonators, and extremist propaganda on how to make bombs and how to use bombs. Now, can you connect the dots? I'll give you a minute. What do you get when you mix books on how to make bombs, books on why you should use bombs on civilians, people with explosive materials, people with explosive detonators, and 2 people working to make bombs? What do you get? The answer is a terrorist bombing. Good, yes, good, okay. Gold star, 10 points Gryffindor. But again, apparently terrorist bombings are not significant threats to national security. Who knew? Then we get to stage 2 of this, where they are granted bail. Okay, $50,000 bail set. Then they make bail. That's interesting. So, okay, here we have what is clearly not a terrorist threat, not a threat to national security. This I like they make bail because it brings up 2 possibilities. And both of them are not good for the media and the standard narrative on what terrorism is. So, as we all know, according to CNN and MSNBC and Mother Jones and whoever else that you shouldn't be listening to, terrorism happens not because of ideologies like radical Islam or Khalistani separatism. No, terrorist bombings happens because sometimes Muslims get sad and then they explode. What do you expect? Sometimes they're sad, sometimes they're angry, they just explode because of colonialism. Yes, colonialism and American foreign policy makes Muslims sad, that makes them explode. Kaboom. Now, one of the reasons people are sad is because they're poor. All poor people are sad, therefore when poor people explode, it's really the fault of capitalism and, Dick Cheney or whatever. They came from a pretty affluent neighborhood in Richmond Hill, and they were able to make a $50,000 bail. Not a lot of poor people have $50,000 laying around to make bail. Now again, this is consistently debunked, the Islamic terrorism narrative of it being sourced from oppression. Right, we saw this in Sri Lanka. One of the suicide bombers was a woman. Women can suicide bomb too, You go, girl. Feminism. Fight the power. A proud feminist was pregnant and decided to have a public abortion party. That's what... Yeah, this wasn't an Islamic terrorist attack. Sri Lanka was part public abortion policy because she took her kids for super late-term abortions and her fetus strapped a bomb on them, bomb of friendship and love, went into a church and blew herself up for what she says is Islam, but clearly it's the fault of Zionism or Newt Gingrich or something. She was married to a millionaire, had a lot to live for, right? Islamic terrorism is the only thing that it's the only crime that becomes more likely the more educated you are. That isn't financially based, crime where you have to get a degree to commit it. Right? It's the only violent crime that increases with education. Right? So that narrative is destroyed here. This is why you're never going to hear about the story again. This is why you'll hear one article come out in 6 months and another one 2 years from now. Hey, remember when? Because the other thing it says here is, who financed this bail? Right? Because terrorism only happens because poor people are sad. Right? That we know that. That is a fact. That is an absolute fact. Terrorism only happens because sometimes poor people get sad and then they explode because what do you expect from people? Personal agency? Don't get me wrong. Now, again, let's just assume these are very poor people from a very affluent neighborhood who had a house and a car and a nice life. but still very poor because Israel or something. Who financed this bail? Right? Who made them? Right? Who's just donating $50,000 to get this father-son tandem, who is potentially a risk? Don't know. Actually, not a national security threat. More of a local threat. More of a dynamic, explosive inconvenience to people. Who's paying this? Do you guys remember the Danforth shooting when the NCCM immediately showed, before the bodies were taken off the streets of the Danforth? Well, little girls were still bleeding out and parents were grieving over their dead children. The spokesperson for the NCCM, formerly CARICAN, associated with the Muslim Brotherhood, good friends of mine, he was there to make a statement on behalf of the family that spoke English about, Faisal Hussein's mental illness and whatever. This is about mental illness, and this isn't about whatever, and this isn't about terrorism, it's about mental illness, right? If it's not about, Muslims only explode or murder people if they're sad or mentally ill, right? No other possible explanation for why Islamic extremism happens. It's just Muslims get sad because Israel exists, and they're poor, so kaboom. Who's here? Who made this bail? Now, I believe in privacy, so we shouldn't know who made the bail, because that could be a whole other implications. It puts people's lives in danger. But it is an interesting question to be asked. Why are people immediately supporting this? Would this assume that there's a larger network of Islamists who support the use of violent jihad to achieve their political means? Maybe. So those are the two possible explanations. Neither of them do very good for the media's narrative, which is why you will see stories like this disappear. And that is why you are hearing things like, he was on the cusp of radicalization. So this is why I don't believe the police in this story either, because they're to the Toronto police. And sources close to the investigation, is the way it's being phrased, have said that the boy was on the cusp of radicalization. Oh, phew! Bullet dodge there. He was just on the cusp of radicalization. Could you imagine what would happen if he was actually radicalized with all those bombs? What the fuck, you took cusp of radicalization? He was building bombs to kill people. Don't worry, they are going to be reasonable, secular, centrist bombings. Don't worry, very rational bombing. Could you imagine what radicalization would have looked like at this point? So he was on the cusp of radicalization. Good to know. Good to know. But this is just like the Toronto police saying, oh, there's no connections to terrorism, right? We found nothing. Then it came out months later when the search warrants went public. It turns out the Toronto police, when they went into Faisal Hussein's room, found a cache of weapons. Found a weapons cache of guns and ammunition, right? And these parents who lived in an apartment with their supposedly very mentally ill and disturbed son just let him stockpile weapons in his room? Is anyone supposed to believe that? Apparently, yes. Why? So do I believe a word from the Toronto Police Department when it comes to matters of national security or terrorism? Not a word. I take everything they say with not a grain of salt. I empty out the Red Sea, distill it, and then dump that on whatever the Toronto Police Department says. Because you can't trust them on these issues, because they've lied to us before. They're politically inept cowards. Cusp of radicalization. Whoa, good thing it wasn't a radical bombing. That would have been bad. Just a nice, reasonable, relaxing, run-of-the-mill, father-son, good-time bombathon. As we do. All right, to wrap up tonight's episode, we'll go on to my thoughts of the day. This one's not going to be as comical, but abortion. Love it or hate it, everyone's talking about it right now. And my big problem with the abortion debate is really the debate we're having and the very low quality of the debate being had on both sides. One thing I really hate, probably my biggest pet peeve, is the pro-choice side not even acknowledging the existence of the pro-life argument. Now, myself, I tend to lean more pro-choice. I've seen these rare cases and these exceptions, the rape and incest things. I've seen abortions where you can make a case it's torture to make that woman bear that pregnancy to term because, extenuating circumstances. I get that. I've seen the exceptions: rape, incest, threat to life of the mother. Yep, okay, I'm there. But I despise the condescending and unproductive rhetoric coming out mainly from the pro-choice side, a little bit from the pro-life side. But my number one pet peeve is these are conservatives trying to control a woman's body. What are you talking about? Okay? The abortion debate is when does life begin and when does life have enough sentience or whatever that terminating it becomes murder. Okay? Because you can't, okay, you can make the argument, life begins at conception. Okay, I can actually buy that. But you can then say there is a big difference between taking Plan B, which aborts a zygote. Let's say you're at 8 cells right now, right? There's a big difference between the abortion of a zygote. No, that's not murder. To me. Some people say it is. Okay, that's the argument. Not to me. And a big difference between what they said in New York and Virginia, where it's like, yeah, you can abort a baby inside the birth canal. That's baby killing. You murdered a baby there. Right? If you're doing a 3rd trimester abortion for no reason, right? If you're 8.5 months pregnant and then you want to go to Bali with your friends, so you get an abortion, no, you murdered that baby. And this whole my body, my choice, like, okay, this isn't the argument. It's not, you know, it's not a my body, my choice. The clear argument is when are there are 2 lives in there, and when does it become unethical to commit an abortion? Right? That's the real argument there. So I will grant the, you know, we can talk rape, incest, threat to life of the mother. You got me, okay? I'm not questioning that at all. But the real question is, we can all agree that, or most people can agree, you know, Plan B to take down a zygote, okay, yeah, that's not murder. But then most reasonable people can say, okay, you know, killing a baby inside the birth canal, yeah, that's murder. So there's a point where a fetus's life becomes viable, right? You're killing what is potentially a life there. So the real pro-life argument is, people talk about, it's body autonomy, body autonomy. Yeah, that's not the issue. It's there's 2 bodies in there, and you don't have the autonomy over someone else's body, right? I have the complete control over my body. I do. I can't use my body to kill you, though, right? It's not body. I just want to do this wherever I want. I just want to do my strangle motion, and your neck just happens to be where I like to strangle the most. Body autonomy. It's not the debate here. The debate is, when does life begin, and at what point does life reach a capacity where it becomes murder to end it, right? And it's a very difficult debate, because you can say, oh, babies or fetuses are stupid, they don't think, therefore we can abort them. But, you know, you can make the argument, there are a lot of species of dogs that are smarter than infants, right? But there are stronger laws against killing infants than dogs. So it's not really a matter of raw intelligence. There's a nuanced debate here. Now, on the abortion side, or the pro-life side, you have these extreme laws in Alabama. Now, Missouri is not as bad, but Alabama, where you're making criminal penalties for abortion, you can't do that, right? You can outlaw abortion, but to criminalize abortion is way too far. Like, that is that's a no-no. You can't criminalize abortion. And I get the pro-life thing. It's like, no, it's murder, and murder is a criminal act, but no, you can't do that. People have the right to choose. Now, I think the happy solution for the states here is, you know, states' rights. It should be illegal to criminalize abortion. So if a woman in Alabama isn't allowed to get an abortion in Alabama, she should be able to drive out of state and get an abortion there. And then I don't think religious institutions should be forced to, you know, pay for abortions. I think that is ultimately the reasonable compromise, but no one will ever get to that compromise. And the problem is, we see the only abortion laws that are coming out now are extreme ones on both sides. New York and Vermont, extreme abortion laws where you can kill babies willy-nilly in the birth canal, right? That people don't generally disagree with that. Then you have Alabama on the other, extreme abortion laws where you criminalize 99 years in jail for an abortion. That is, you can't do that. Both of those are way too extreme, and you're not having any. And this is again the problem is. This debate tends to give weight to the extremists. So what I will say is, try and listen to the other side here. If you're on the left, you've probably turned this show off more than half an hour ago, but listen to the pro-life argument. If you actually care about the women's right to have an abortion, right? And again, I can see cases, right? Threat to life of mother. I've heard cases of babies just born with no brain tissue, and they just kind of exist in a miserable state for 3 months before they die, right? If you know that's going to happen, you know, I'm okay with that abortion. Okay, I am. But I understand why people would not be okay with that. But if you ever want to get somewhere where you're not yelling at each other, where you can actually talk to each other, the pro-life and the pro-choice people need to realize what the other people's arguments are, and especially the pro-choice thing. No one is trying to control women's bodies. There are no politicians. It's not white males. 50% of American women are pro-life, right? It's pretty split. If anything, minority communities are more pro-life than white communities, but it's a split issue. There are no politicians thinking, yeah, I want to control that uterus. Yeah, it just gets me off. Oh, if Cindy's uterus is full of babies, yeah. That was said by no one ever. That is not their motivation. The motivation of the pro-life position is there are 2 lives in there, and abortion is murder. If you cannot debate them on that aspect, don't expect any reasonable abortion laws coming down the pipeline anytime soon. So, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for bearing with me when I gave my thoughts on abortion. He is a man! Stop talking, man! Anyways, so yes, this will be coming up on YouTube tomorrow, which is Thursday, and if you're watching this on YouTube, then you're in the future already, so damn dirty apes. I will see you next Wednesday at 6 p.m. here, and everyone have a great week, and please don't be mad at me. Goodbye.